Hello, my name is Sam New, and this is my assignment submission for the Media 2010 assignment, Teenpix. Now, after reading the article and looking at some different John Hughes movies, I wanted to look at the movie, the classic Breakfast Club. And when thinking of like classic teen films, that one comes to mind before anything else. And so when kind of looking at this and reading the article and having this in mind, Breakfast Club is actually mentioned in the article when the author talks about coming of age classics. And I thought that was very interesting for the Breakfast Club. Is I definitely see it as a coming of age story, but as a coming of age story using traditional high school stereotypes. And obviously, like throughout the movie, these stereotypes are kind of put together and kind of shown, but the characters kind of become more complex and have more depth and development throughout the movie, right? As they kind of come together and kind of they start breaking out of that stereotype a little bit that we all kind of create for ourselves, right? And so I wanted to look at more movies that had this like coming of age using kind of these stereotypes, but expanding beyond the stereotypes and still creating this coming of age story with teenagers, right? So there was a scene I was watching in Breakfast Club that kind of like caught my eye when I was thinking about different modern interpretations of this type of story. The lunchtime clip, which I don't know what it is with like teen films and like school and lunch, but that's like something that pops up quite a bit, right? That's the experience we've all had. And that clip kind of reminded me of some other teenage films in the modern day that kind of have this coming of age using, having lunch scenes or whatnot. And those two pieces of media were the show Euphoria, which is kind of a high school coming of age, falling more into stereotypes, but using them in a constructive way for the story. And Eighth Grade, which is a movie about this like coming of age, living in this like high school setting, right? And I'm gonna go over both of those. The Breakfast Club lunchtime clip is below and kind of like leans into the stereotypes a little bit and kind of their interactions with the different characters. But when I was looking at both these movies, I was wondering if anyone like made a comparison or any comparisons to any of these. And reading an article from the Seattle Times, one author or journalist, Disha Kamanchi, I hope I said that right, was kind of making these comparisons for like teenage stereotypes in modern media and how they like lean into that storytelling. And it kind of says some bad examples, but sets one of the better examples of like using these stereotypes to kind of create these stories, was when they said more thoughtful teen shows like Euphoria, and I'm not okay with this, challenge these gender roles by expanding how such limitations affect their characters in a meaningful way. So these limitations being this like roles or these stereotypes within high school. In Euphoria, Nate Jacobs explores the consequences of toxic masculinity, while Jules challenges the barriers of sexuality by breaking gender stereotypes. While some elements of Euphoria are not entirely realistic, it does produce meaningful, relatable characters that break out of their high school roles, right? And that kind of leans into the idea of not super realistic. These stereotypes are often very over exaggerated, and they are exaggerated in Euphoria as well, but they use these kind of baseline ideas of stereotypes so that these characters can break out of them or like develop more outside of that. And the way another scene that kind of leans into this storytelling through these stereotypes was a clip in season 2 of Euphoria. There's a meltdown scene where they're talking about the school play or whatnot, and like there's another school play going on, and there's one of the characters walks into the bathroom kind of dressed a certain way, and the character that Zendaya is playing asks if she's in the play because of the way she's dressed, right? And more people in the women's bathroom are like asking about this, and she ends up having a meltdown because she's not in the play, and everyone is kind of criticizing, or she thinks she's being criticized for how she dresses, because she didn't know she looked like she was in a play with with her outfit, and that kind of uses like the stereotype of like, you know, the prep and the theater to kind of lean into that a little bit more, that like emotion or that like experience, right? And that kind of goes in one direction, kind of following in Breakfast Club's footsteps of using that relatability and storytelling through these stereotypes. I think Eighth Grade is another great take, but in the opposite direction. I think Breakfast Club was a good like stepping stone to like kind of break the barriers of these stereotypes that we saw in, and we still see in flicks all the time. And I think that two things that developed out of that was still leaning to those stereotypes and creating meaningful stories out of those. And another one was kind of weighing off those stereotypes to create a more relatable or realistic experience that you can relate to, which I think was kind of the goal of Eighth Grade. In an article by Adam Mihal from The Heights. Oh, sorry. They say, quote, entirely from her point of view, the audience watches her navigate through multiple stress-inducing social minefields, such as pool parties, announcements for class, superlatives. And this is referring to the main character, Kayla, in Eighth Grade, where the main story is kind of her and her experience going through Eighth Grade, through at home and navigating everything that happens through school. Director Burnham has created a film that is hyper modern. It's not a retrospective look at Eighth Grade through, like, the author says, not a retrospective look at Eighth Grade through the rosy glasses of the 90s, which I thought was funny because that's where we see a lot of these like teen flicks. Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter are on full display, and the ramifications are explored and discussed. So this is a modern take, removing kind of the stereotypes, the influences of the 90s, and films like this coming from the 90s, stripping all that away, taking the core value of this like relatability, coming to age thing that we've experienced, or a lot of these are kind of aimed towards teens who are currently going through that experience, and giving us the raw story whilst removing those narrative tools like stereotypes and replacing them with things like Instagram or kind of social awkwardness, which is something that we experience. So I thought that was very interesting, because in Eighth Grade, we see a lunch scene. I would highly recommend watching the lunch scene in Breakfast Club, and it shows these stereotypes on full display, like just by their food selection and how they present themselves during lunch. We get an idea of each of these characters. And when it comes to Eighth Grade, there is a scene in the mall where they're all, you know, sharing food and hanging out. The portrayal of their characters is still seen, but not in that stereotypical way whatsoever. It's very dialogue heavy, and it's very much like these characters are, you get an idea of who they are through that dialogue. I would highly recommend watching both those scenes and the scene from Euphoria, and seeing kind of how those stereotypes are, those characters portray themselves in such short amount of time. But I thought that was really interesting, and the themes of kind of coming of age through these stereotypes was, I thought that was very interesting, and a modern interpretation of it, both like leaning into these stereotypes and still telling the stories, or weighing off of those stereotypes but still telling these stories through other means. So that was my kind of interpretation of the Teenpix, of Breakfast Club, of the article, and my thoughts on how it relates to the modern day. So thank you so much, and I hope that kind of scratched your brain a little bit, kind of made you think more, and have a good one.